In college basketball, the Fighting Illini will move on to the round of 16, while Northwestern will be packing their bags heading home. In football, the owners are meeting down in Orlando, Florida, in the land of Disney World. In basketball, the Bulls didn't look so hot against the Celtics, and baseball's opening days is now only 3 days away. We'll have that and plus Old School TV Monday, that and a whole lot more as the Monday edition of Second City Sports starts right now. Welcome to the last Monday edition of Second City Sports for the month of March. We're live in the living color right here on Sports Soul Chicago, along with Miss Lakeem McGee, which is she. I am Cindy Brown. Hey, that's me. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow my Lakeem McGee on the Twitter, X, the Q's going in the IG.
Make sure you download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and YouTube. Subscribe to our podcast. We are located at War Media Podcast. That's WARR Media, PODCASTS. We are on all podcast platforms, including that iHeartRadio app. While you're ready, please give War Media a follow at WARR Media on all social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and YouTube. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
We are unapologetically fun, and we have very definite opinions. If you have any definite opinions during our 2-hour extravaganza, we call it Sports Talk Radio Show. You can always hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments in the comments section. Lakeem will get them up on the screen for you. But you decide to troll and or do something silly, dumb, or stupid, I'll give Lakeem full powers to give your fools the bill and be a boot.
Toodles.
But before we begin, we must remind you can catch Sports Zone Chicago live in living color right now on Roku TV. That's right. So celebrate the squad and get with the program. Sports Zone Chicago is now available on Roku TV. If you already have Roku television, just tap on the sports folder and download that Sports Zone Chicago app. If you do not have a Roku television, but you have some handheld devices laying around, iPhone, iPad, iTouch, or Android, your personal PC, or your Chromebook, just hit up the Google Play Store and download that Roku TV app and access Sports Zone Chicago through that avenue. So no more excuses. Celebrate the squad and get with the program. Sports Zone Chicago is now available on Roku TV. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Live and on demand.
Anytime, anywhere.
And you know we will provide.
And we'll be providing you with some of the fun here on Second City Sports. Of course, since we we previewed the White Sox season on Friday, you can catch the replay of that on the Sports on Chicago's Facebook, YouTube pages. Now we're going to have the Cubs turn with our buddy Evan Altman from Cubs Insider. Bulls didn't look too well against the Celtics and the rest of the weekend in the NBA, and time permitting, we'll do some women's basketball as well. And the NFL owners meeting is going on right now down in South Florida. But first, Sid, we're now down to the Sweet 16 in men's college hoops as the Fighting Illini. We'll start with local teams first. The Fighting Illini of Illinois. They punched their first ticket to the Sweet 16 the first time since the 05 season, which that was actually when they went to the national championship game. Of course, they lost to North Carolina, but they had no trouble with Duquesne from the A10, and it was definitely a concerted effort. And look, I mean, you did what you're supposed to do. Look, to their credit, I'm talking about Illinois. I mean, they did what they're supposed to do against it. And I don't want to call the Dukes inferior, but because they're actually a really good team. They pulled off the upset on Thursday, I should say. But the Illini, look, they took care of business. They did what they're supposed to do, and they looked really good on Saturday.
As we told you guys throughout this whole season, the offense for the Fighting Illini starts and ends for Terrence Shannon Jr. as Lakina said, given the opponents that they played, Morehead State and Duquesne last Saturday, the Illini did what they're supposed to do. In my opinion, talking about the Illini, they played more of a complete game on Saturday than they did on Thursday. They set the tone throughout the start. They were hot shooting from the outside, even though they shot 33% overall from three for the victory last Saturday. But Terrence Shannon Jr. leads that offensive unit for the Illini. When he gets on the fast break and use that athleticism, the whole team is just about unstoppable. Marcus Domas got to go it again. Dane Danger is a strong big man coming off the bench. Coleman Hawkins even got in on it after scoring in double digits for the first time in this tournament. It was an all-around complete performance for Illinois. I'm sure we're going to get into this later on in the hour, but I'm concerned for them as far as defensively. They did do the job against Duquesne and a lesser opponent, but they're going to have to step it up just a little bit more against a better opponent this coming Thursday in Boston against Iowa State.
Yeah, in the East region. Well, we'll talk about Iowa State and how good they look after the break. But I think look, Illinois. Look, I'm like what Mark Potash said. I mean, like, look, they played a 14-11, so look, they did what they're supposed to do, and their defense wasn't really the best. But look, they did just enough to win that game, and that's what you want them to do. And look, even Brad Underwood had a little bit of fun with the Super Soakers. If you guys saw that clip of him, spraying all the guys with Super Soakers, so it was actually pretty funny. Terrence Shannon Jr. had 30 points, and look, I think he's really going to be the key. We'll talk about that game on Friday, but it'll be interesting to see if Illinois can kind of sort of try to keep it going, because they're going to be facing a team that is themselves been battle tested. So I'm a little concerned about that, because they did give up some big plays late, but if the game was kind of out of reach anyway. So, but you're okay if you're the Illini, but you're really gonna have to face a big test on Friday.
As I mentioned, with the fast break opportunities that the Illini created for themselves last Saturday, they had a 16-5 edge in terms of fast break points against Duquesne. Also, 2 points in the paint, 52-32. So, as we talked about all season, Lakina, my biggest worry about the Illini, when they don't shoot the ball well, unless the defense gives it to them, they don't force the issue of going inside and drawing fouls. Well, they did that on Saturday, so especially in that first half where their shots were falling and with the defensive pressure that Duquesne was trying to put on the Illini broke the press, and they went to the hall, and they were slam dunking, laid it in, and they looked like a complete basketball team. So those are the two areas I wanted to point out as far as they went over Duquesne last Saturday. Like we said before, it's going to be a much tougher task coming up this Thursday in Boston against Iowa State. Iowa State is a very, very physical team. They can score, but we know one of the flaws from this Illini team is, one, when they don't shoot the ball well, they don't force the issue of going to the basket with any consistency. And number two, they're not as tough defensively as some of the better teams in the country.
And look, we'll talk about Iowa State after the break, but yeah, they will be interested to see if Illinois, we'll talk more about that after the break. It was Second City Sports on Sports of Chicago. Lakina McGee, Sydney Brown with you now. In the same region, also in the East region. Unfortunately, Northwestern, their season ends also to the great career of Boo Buie ends. He only had 9 points as UConn defending champs. They just hammered the Wildcats 75-58, and I'm not surprised by this. I don't think anybody should be surprised by this score. The only thing about UConn is that they only shot about 14% from the 3-point line. But, look, even still, that this game would have been even more out of hand. But the fact that they weren't hitting their shots now for UConn, I mean, probably one of the better, is in the country. Tristan Newton, probably one of the best, senior guards in the country. He had 22 points. Their big men up front, Clingan, he had 14 points. Daniel Clingan, he had 14 points, I should say, and was a big force up front. He had 14 boards, and Donovan Clingan, and he's one of those guys that he was out earlier this year. You see how much of a big difference he makes once he adds on, especially up front. He's definitely a big, he plays more like a power forward than he does a center, but that's kind of more the style of what Dan Hurley wants to play. But yeah, I mean, to the Northwestern's credit, look, the guys, as far as they beat FAU. We'll talk about their coach in a second, because he now has a new job. But yeah, I mean, you saw that long embrace with Boo Buie had with Chris Collins, of course, Taylor Battle, his half brother. Of course, he's a coaches. You member of his coaching staff. Of course, he's a leading scorer at Penn State history. But yeah, Northwestern was just UConn was just too strong, too fast, too good, as Stacey King would say, and they
Yeah.
showed why they're defending champs.
It was a good year for Northwestern. They had 13 wins in the Big Ten, tied for the most ever in school history. So Chris Collins, a job well done. Of course, you don't like your season to end that way, but like you said, Lakina, they ran up against a better team. 20 of the first 22 points that the UConn Huskies scored were from the inside. Overall, they outmanned Northwestern, almost doubling their point totals in the paint for the whole game, 52 to 26. And also, too, Lakina, I noticed the way UConn played. I don't know if it was just this design was for Northwestern's defense, but they like to run a lot of screens, especially at the top of the key. And they were killing Northwestern yesterday, especially with those backdoor plays.
Yeah, that's really what kind of killed them there. And they couldn't, like I said, Buio couldn't get it going. Marinelli couldn't get it going. So they were just, look, I think they just, kind of like, ran to a buzzsaw that is UConn. And they definitely did struggle. Now, Bernheiser, did try to, did his best. He led the way with 16 points for Northwestern, but it just wasn't enough. And I think, look, we kind of think that maybe if they were at full strength, they probably could have given UConn a little bit of a better game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think UConn is like it's showing you, like I said, there's a reason why they're defending champs. This is a totally different team than who won it last year. So this is a UConn team that people thought, okay, they I think some people would say that the last year's squad overachieved, win the championship coming out of kind of out of nowhere. But this team is sort of like the team that people thought, okay, this team could be like one of the top teams in the country.
Yeah, and when you're playing like that, playing a complete game like that, and everyone's focused, so this is results you're going to get. Also, two other factors to know for this game for UConn. I'm not going to say out fast break, but that's a bad English on my part. But they doubled the fast break total points for Northwestern, 18-8, and with the assists, 20-8. So they play team basketball. They share the basketball. When you do that, everybody can contribute and get involved. And that's what we saw yesterday with the Huskies. They are a complete team. Remember, Lakina, we said this a month ago, back in mid to late February, could the Huskies repeat? And I said there's a chance. I didn't put any money on it, but they had a very good chance to repeat, only because they were ignored because of other teams like Kansas, Duke, North Carolina, and Baylor to a lesser extent were getting all the pub. They were getting all the press because you had about 6 or 7 teams that took the spot at number one so far this year, and now we're getting down to the nitty gritty of this tournament. Things are starting to even out, and UConn is at the top of the heap once again.
All right, stay tuned for more recap. From the tournament coming up next is I think Purdue just sent a message that don't forget about us. And so we had a buzzer beater last night as well, and a couple of blowouts too. So we'll recap the rest of the round of 32 games. Coming up next, Lakina McGee, Cindy Brown, Second City Sports on Sports of Chicago. More tourney talk coming up right after this.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too. These new socks? They can be a real lifesaver.
And I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy? I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you. Your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov, a public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hey, this is Dr. J, and I listen to Sean and Maya in the morning.
Welcome back to Second City Sports, the Monday edition. This is our last Monday show for the month of March. We're live and in living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm Sid. That's Lakina. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow my Keena McGee on the Twitter, X, like he was going to be on the IG.
We have less than 90 minutes left of this extravaganza we call a sports talk radio show. If you have any questions or comments for us, you can always hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago YouTube. Type in those questions and comments in the comments section. Lakina will get them up on the screen for you.
All right, so let's stay with our little attorney talk. This time we'll go to the Midwest region, and these are yesterday's games as Purdue just hammered Utah State 106-67. Zach Edey had 23 points and 14 boards. And it's a deadly, of course, as Shaquille O'Neal would say. We're probably calling Zaquille O'Neal, as he would say. This is third straight. This is like the third straight game with he has like 20 points. He had like 4 blocks. In a tournament game since Shaq did all the way back in both the 91 and 92 tournaments that he was in. But it wasn't just Mr. Edey here. Look, the thing with Purdue is that one, Zach Edey gets going, so does Purdue. But Fletcher Lawyer, who had a couple big shots for Purdue, Brayton Smith. I mean, and who was that other one? Oh, Trey Kaufman-Wren. I mean, if those guys are, if the Purdue's meshing, look, that's a very good Utah State team they beat, and they beat them pretty handily. So they just dominated them from jump.
Yeah, Utah State were overmatched. And like you said, when Zach Edey gets it going, especially in the paint, he is hard to stop. I know Purdue's head coach Matt Painter had a couple of words for a couple of reporters after the game, talking about what makes Zach Edey so special. I'm just paraphrasing here, but like you said, Purdue, they're an overall complete team, just like UConn is. I know Zach Edey, people are criticizing him because he doesn't do much outside of scoring inside, but he's a very good defender. He alters shots. He blocks shots. He's a very good rebounder as well. He does what a big man is supposed to do, is patrolling the paint. And what more can you ask from a big guy like that? That's 7'2", 300 pounds of lean muscle.
Yeah, I mean, look, that guy. Look, he's definitely got that that definition there. You saw his mom. His mom taught him a game. She played basketball. I think she did play college basketball too for a little bit. And I think it's kind of silly those comments. I mean, well, what more do you want him to do? I mean, he actually shoots a 3 every once in a while. So I don't know what more they want from him, but they'll play on Friday and in the Midwest region. So big, definitely a message sent by the Boilermakers. Now going to the South region. No, that's not Kelvin Sampson calling, but shout out to my Diaz who had the call of this game. Actually a thriller here on TNT. I think I was on TNT, I believe. 100-95. Houston, an old Southwest Conference rivals, getting it going for that matchup, and Anderson Garcia hit a great 3-pointer, kind of like a blind shot. He kind of just threw it up and just kind of said a prayer, and and of course the prayer was answered, but. To Houston's credit, I mean, they're 4 of their 5 starters fouled out, including Jamal Shed, Big 12 conference player of the year. But they had to get guys like Elvin and Davis, who was one of the Kelvin Sampson's top recruits. I mean, they kind of had to sort of like pick up the slack once Sheedy and some Shed and some of the guys were fouled out.
Yeah, Jamal Sher. Remember that name on Line 9 fans from a couple years ago? But I digress. But as far as the actual game was concerned, I was very entertained by it. Houston was up late. And of course, Texas A&M ended regulation with a 13-3 run, as you mentioned. They ended that run with a game-tying 3, which forced overtime. Of course, Emmanuel Sharp took over for Houston. He scored 30 points for the entire game. But on the other side for the Aggies, Tyrese Radford had 27 points, 15 rebounds, and 6 assists. But you could tell that, again, late in overtime, the Aggies ran out of energy and they ran out of time. Their shots won falling once overtime started.
Yeah, so excuse me, that was a nice showing there by Houston, showing that resiliency and that battle testiness that they've been, pulling with all year. Now, staying in the South region, the number 2 seed there, Marquette, got all they can handle for Colorado in a very entertaining game, I have to say. And 81-77. The Bucks had their chances to get to pull it in, perhaps even pull ahead, but they just couldn't get it going. It was Marquette's defense that kind of sort of like stole the show there. Tyler Kolek, one of Shaka Smart's senior leaders, he had 21 points for them, and he's actually incidentally, he actually also had 10 assists, which was amazing. And he's just the second guy to do it, to have consecutive games with at least 15 points, 10 assists, and 5 rebounds. He had 7 rebounds. The last guy to do that was Mr. Draymond Green, who did it in the 2011-2012 tournament. So Cole enjoyed some good company, and a nice show for Shaka Smart and his Eagles.
Yeah, congratulations to Shaka Smart. He got a little bit emotional if you caught the post-game interview afterwards. To say he was proud of his guys, and he expected them to be there. They weren't done. I know some people, we talked about UConn being overlooked as far as winning it all about a month ago. People are sleeping on the Marquette, and they showed you why they're one of the best battle-tested teams in the country, playing in the Big East. In Colorado, now soon to be defunct Big 12. I know some people thought that they weren't going to get in, but they really showed themselves as well. KJ Simpson led the Buffaloes with 20 points and 7 assists. But as you mentioned, Marquette plays hard-nosed defense, and they made some of the big-time plays down the stretch.
Yeah, nice showing for Marquette. Should be a fun one there on Friday in the South region, I should say. Now let's go west. Go to the West region. The games will air on Thursday. The Sweet 16 games. Clemson with their first trip to the Sweet 16 since I believe like 2011. And I don't think anybody thought that that they would even get this far, but they just hammered Baylor. Well, not hammered, but they pulled away from Baylor 72-64. And it's interesting. Incidentally, a lot of people thought that maybe Clemson probably didn't belong in the tournament, but again, the ACCs, showing you a message. We'll talk about more. Chase Hunter had 20 points, and what's interesting here is that Clemson could have been Clemsoning like a basketball edition, but unfortunately the Bears just couldn't get it going, especially shooting for 3. They're only 6 for 24 from 3-point range. And I think we got Walter, who was one of their best free throw shooters, couldn't get it going. He had a chance to tie it, perhaps maybe force overtime. Missed both free throws, unfortunately. And Clemson, to their credit, they were able to make some big shots to put it away.
Let's give PJ Hall some credit here for Clemson. He had a couple of big dunks in that game yesterday, and so he's been one of their key role players all year long. On the flip side for Baylor, Ray J. Dennis, their star guard, had 27 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. Like you said, Baylor really couldn't get it going. They trailed for the majority of the game. They trailed by 10 at halftime. They started to get it going in that second half, but like you said, you miss free throws, and it's the little things that count. throughout this time of the year. Missed free throws, not getting that key rebound, taking a charge, just the little subtle things that separates the men from the boys.
Yeah, and look, give Clemson credit. I mean, I think, look, no one thought that Clemson would even be in the tournament. So the fact that Brett Brownwell got his guys going, so yeah, look, I think look, they got to be respected. So give a little bit of love. Clemson actually has some little shots here and there on the basketball side. So and they're getting it this year. So good for the Tigers. Staying in the South region, Duke kind of quietly, no one's really talking about them. They're just, they're taking care of business. They had no trouble with James Madison, 93-55. They're back in the Sweet 16. John Shire and his guys. Jared McClain, once he gets going, it's kind of, I know Flipkowski gets a lot of pub, but look, McClain is probably another one of those top guards in the country. 30 points leading the way there. Flipkowski, speaking of, have 14 points. Also, Tyrese Proctor had 18 for John Shire and his guys. Now they're back in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, Duke, just like we talked about with Illinois in our last break, you're facing a lesser opponent. You want to set your mark early, and that's what Duke did. They shot the ball well, as you mentioned, with Jared McCain hitting 83 points for him personally. Duke set the tone from start to finish, and they didn't give James Madison any hope. Shout out to Bernie Bickerstaff's grandson on the team, TJ Bickerstaff. He had 11 points to lead James Madison. But for Duke, this is what you want to do against a lesser opponent. Set the tone from the start and leave no room for error, and that's what happened. And that's why they're on their way to the round of 16.
Yeah, I think if you're Coach Shaw, you're probably happy that no one's really talking about you, but they do face Houston. So, that'll be it should be a good match. We'll talk about that. In the West region, Alabama got all they could handle from Grand Canyon, the Lopes, but Alabama made some big shots late. Now they're back in the Sweet 16. Let's see here if my computer will cooperate. But yeah, Mark Sears had 28 points, which is a season high for him. He made some big shots late. Now, Grand Canyon, to their credit, though, they kept it very close. They thought that maybe they had a shot, perhaps maybe it, but 26 points, should say, for Sears. But I want to give a shout out to Tyan, I should say, Grant Foster, of course. For those of you who, DePaul, he played at DePaul. He collapsed during practice, had to have 2 heart surgeries, came back, couldn't play for 2 years, came back, whacked Conference Player of the Year, led the team back to the tournament. They beat St. Mary's, but they just couldn't. He did get 20 points, but they couldn't get going against Alabama. But Bryce Drew should get a lot of credit because he's got a nice little foundation down there in Arizona.
Yes, the Antelopes of Grand Canyon, like you said, they didn't have enough down the stretch. Alabama took over within the last 5-6 minutes of the game. But like you said, the teams like Grand Canyon, those small schools that they have their players on their roster for the last 2 or 3 years. And let's give this some love too. The extra year because of COVID, those middle of the road teams, those mid-major teams stayed together as well. So we shouldn't have been surprised of the way they play now. Did all of them advance? No. They did the first 2 days of the tournament with the 4 double-digit seeds winning last Thursday, 3 double-digit seeds winning last Friday. But as I said before, you start to see the cream rise to the top. But like you said, Grand Canyon, they did play their hearts out. They were in this thing all the way.
Yeah, really. Yeah, like I said, look, Alabama, they took care of business, but like I said, the Lopes should, to get some credit for at least hanging on for as long as they did. So they should be commended for that. Now, staying in the East, going to the East region for this last game from yesterday. San Diego State, no trouble with Yale, 85-57. I know Sid was happy when Yale beat Auburn. Jay Ledee from
no, Charles Barkley was.
Oh, well, yeah, he was. But, Jalen Ledee from, of course, Conference Player of the Year from the Mountain West had 28 points. But, San Diego, that was all San Diego State from jump.
Yeah, Jalen Ledee had a great game with 29 points and 6 rebounds. He mixed it up with his offensive repertoire, shooting a couple of threes from the outside, but he was really dominant inside. Yale just did not have a chance. And for San Diego State, here's another team that, that people are not talking about coming out of that Mountain West Conference. Remember, they were in the Final Four last year. I know we didn't talk about it as much during our last couple of shows, but give the Aztecs credit. They as of right now they're showing that last year making it to the Final Four was no fluke.
No, and they have and look, they have they went made it to the championship game as well. So they're going to be facing UConn in that championship game on Friday. So yeah, that should be a fun one. There we'll talk about that. Now going to Saturday's games, going into the West region, North Carolina no trouble with Michigan State. R.J. Davis had 20 points, and North Carolina after being out of the tournament last year, now they're back in. They're back to the Sweet 16.
Also, too, let's give some love to Armando Babcock, their big guy inside. 18 points and 7 rebounds for the Tar Heels. On the flip side, as you mentioned, Tyson Walker, 24 points. But A.J. Hallgard had a disappointing game. He only scored 3 points, 1 of 10 shooting, including a 1 from 2 from 3-point range. You really didn't get anything out of your bench. I'm talking about your Tom Izzo in the Michigan State Spartans. I think he only had 9 points or 11 points total coming from the bench. They really struggled. I'm talking about Michigan State in that second half. North Carolina took over, and the better team won.
Yeah, they really did. Unfortunately for Michigan State, this is only a fitting way to end the season. They lose to James Madison to finish the season and to start the season, and then they get their butts kicked by North Carolina as they pull it away late. So unfortunately, that's a microcosm to what happened there. Arizona, staying in the West region, Arizona had to make some big shots late from Caleb Webb, I should say, but they did beat Dayton 78-68. Speaking of Love, he had 19 points for them. They really had got things going down the offensive side. Kashad Johnson made some big shots late to kind of keep the Flyers at bay.
Yeah, give Dayton credit, like you said. I did watch the majority of this game. This was the first game last Saturday on TV. And Dayton kept right in there. They were tough defensively in that first half. They matched Arizona blow by blow. Say that 5 times fast. But as you mentioned, Arizona made the big plays down the stretch. Also, too, Paley Larson had 13.7 rebounds, 6 assists. On the flip side for the Flyers, Darren Holmes II had 23 points and 11 rebounds. Dayton, we talked about Loyola a couple weeks ago, Lakina, where they lost in the first round in the Atlantic 10 tournament. They should be back next year with Drew Valentine and crew. You can say the same thing about Dayton. I know they were ranked in the lower half of the top 25 during the last couple of weeks of the regular season. I think they'll be back as well. What they showed last Saturday afternoon, it was no fluke.
No, they really didn't. They can't. They stayed with Arizona as long as much as they could for as long as they could. But like I said, they made some big shots late. So that was a good game there. Now going to the East region, the Illini's next opponent on Thursday. It'll be Iowa State. Mason got a little bit of a scare from Washington State. We'll talk about their coach because he's now on the move. But the Cyclones, they look. This is going to be interesting for this. I think Illinois and the Cyclones are pretty evenly matched. I mean, they're kind of I don't want to say they mirror each other, but they're sort of very similar in their style of play. They will kill you with the zone. I think that's what got to Wazoo late. One of the Cyclones' best players, Keyshawn Gilbert, who was all Big 12, made some big shots late, and also to Tasha Lipsy. He also made some big shots late for them. And look, they can go pretty deep. I'm talking about the Cyclones. So the Illinois is going to have a very tough go at it. Curtis Jones is a beast off the bench for them, a veteran guy. So Illinois is going to have a tough time against the Cyclones.
Yeah, the Cyclones really turned it around in the second half. Of course, it was tied at 27 at the half, but Iowa State outscored the Cougars by 11 in that second half, 40-29, as you mentioned. Iowa State's big guys showed up when they needed to, and Washington State just ran out of gas, and their shots were not falling. So, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Iowa State is a very good defensive team. They're a very physical team, but I'll caution the Illini this: if they don't set the tone early like they did last Saturday, it's going to be a long night for them. And Iowa State can get up and down the floor with Illinois, but if Illinois doesn't pay attention to detail on defense, it's going to be a long night for them.
Like I said, that zone is what killed Houston against them a couple of weeks ago in the Big 12 championship. That's what got them. So Illinois is going to have to be on the lookout for that. Now going into the Midwest region, Tennessee, again, they got all they could handle from Texas, but their defense kind of was able to kind of keep Texas at bay. Dalton Kennick had 18 points, made some big shots late, and some key defensive stops for them, and they're back in the Sweet 16.
Call me crazy, Lakina. Haven't paid much attention to this team all year, but how did Texas make the tournament, especially playing in one of the toughest conferences in the country in the Big 12? But they gave Tennessee a game yesterday. You mentioned Dalton Connect. He came up big. Also on the flip side for the Longhorns, Tyrese Hunter had 13 points and 6 rebounds for the Longhorns. But as you mentioned, Tennessee, they've been there before as well. They just haven't been able to get over their hump and reach a Final Four. Maybe this is a year for them to do it, but they were battle tested yesterday, and they came out as on the other side as a 4-point winner.
Yeah, nice win for Rick Barnes and his guys. I'll stay in the Midwest region. Oregon and Creighton probably won the games of the tournament in a double overtime thriller, 86-73. Unfortunately, they just ran, I guess. How about Oregon? We talked about Mr. Cuisinart and Dante, and they had 20. He had 28 points. Talk about Dante, and Cuisinart had 32. Unfortunately, they didn't get a lot of help from everywhere else, and I think that's what killed them late. I think what really killed Oregon was the fact that the inbounds, pass to Cuisinart, who was behind Dante. Dante, as great as isn't the best free throw shooter. So if Cuisinart had shot both those free throws, then the game would have been put away. Now they did come back in the first overtime, but they ran out of gas, and Creighton ended up winning it. But look, Shireman, he might have traveled in that 3-point game. Well, I'm not talking about that. He had 18 points. Trey Alexander had 20 points for Creighton, and this was a thrilling game. But like I said, Oregon just ran out of gas.
Yeah, and Creighton, playing in that Big East, we know they're up and down team. They can shoot the ball well with the best of them in the country. But like you said, Lakina, outside of Infale and Dante, Oregon, they're really getting much help, especially in that second overtime when they started to run out of gas. As you mentioned, Creighton had that pedal to the metal, especially in that second overtime. They were starting to get fatigued as well, but they had enough just to win.
Yeah, they really did. And you wonder, had there been a third overtime, I think somebody had to drive both players. So it's going to be interesting. Yeah. They've gone to third. I mean, that's whatever. But but I digress. Now again, staying in the Midwest region, Gonzaga beat Kansas 89-68. This game was over. This game was actually because Kansas only up 1. So, but unfortunately, Gonzaga scored 46 points. Kansas only scored 24. And not having Kevin McCullough Jr. there, and not having the depth that they need, and they just couldn't get going on the shooting side for Kansas, especially. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that Gonzaga beat Kansas. I mean, the score probably shouldn't really surprise me either, but it's just that to me, it's just that simple.
Yeah, for the 9th straight year, Mark Few and his crew, the Bulldogs will be heading to the Sweet 16. Anton Watson for the Bulldogs had 21 points and 6 rebounds. On the flip side for Kansas, DeJuan Harris Jr. had 10 points and 11 assists. As you said, Lakina, the injuries for Kansas took its toll. I know many people, including you, truly thought they should have lost that game last Thursday against Samford, if it wasn't for that bad call at the end. But I digress. But Gonzaga was the better team in the second half. They executed their plays to perfection, and that's what won them this ballgame.
Well, look, if it were up to me, because I wouldn't have gotten in the tournament. But again, I digress there as well. But whatever. But we'll see what happens on Friday. Thursday. Play Thursday. But finishing up in the South region, between two. Well, don't call them Cinderellas, I guess. But North Carolina State got the best of Oakland, Michigan in overtime, 79-73. Look, I mean the dream thing continues for the Wolfpack. DJ Burns Jr. had 24 points and 11 boards and 4 assists. The other DJ Home, had 11 points. All 5 stars were in double figures for the Wolfpack. And look, I'll give Oakland credit. It's Jack Goki did hit some 3-pointers early, but by the second half and overtime, he just wasn't hitting them, unfortunately. And now North Carolina State, they're back in the Sweet 16 for the first time since I think 2015 was on our. I think Julius Hodge was on that team that made it to the Sweet 16 that year for the Wolfpack, and Look,
Boy,
I mean,
that was so long. You're not even making me feel old.
yeah. It's been a while since that Wolfpack, but look, to their credit, look, they've been able to just soldier on and keep on going.
Yeah, now they, I believe, 7-0 in their last 7 games. Lakina, of course, we talked about this Wolfpack team. They had to win all 5 of their games in the ACC tournament just to qualify for the NCAA tournament. If they didn't win any of those games, they would be sitting at home right now. But as we talked about before the tournament, we worried about this team having fatigue issues. It hasn't been an issue yet. Maybe it'll start to become a factor a little bit as they go on to the round of 16, playing in this overtime game last Saturday. But those guys just keep on rolling. But on the flip side for Oakland, you mentioned about Jack Golke. He was one of the best stories of this tournament. Trey Townsend had a big game for them as well with 30 points and 13 rebounds. But North Carolina State, they had enough injury in that overtime. Shots were not falling for Oakland. That's why NC State came out with the win, going back to the Sweet 16 for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, they should be commended too. Talking about Oakland, so definitely think they're gonna. Like I said, I know Goki got some nice little NIL money coming his way, and I'm sure Townsend will as well. So should be interesting to see what happens with that. Now, real quick, before we talk to our buddy Evan Altman from Cubs Insider, Thursday's matchups, both in the West and the East regions. The West, you got number 6 Clemson and number 2 Arizona. These games are in Los Angeles at that. Well, I'm not going to call it that corporate name down there. San Diego State. In the East Region, though, these will be on CBS. This game will be on CBS. San Diego State and UConn, that'll be on TBS, and Cast on True TV as well. That's in Boston, where the Celtics play TD Garden. The game after that, also on CBS in the West region, you got Alabama, North Carolina. That should be a fun one in Los Angeles. And, of course, Illinois and Iowa State. That's the nightcap game on TBS and True TV at approximately 9:09 in Boston.
Okay, I'll give you my winners. Give me Arizona, UConn, UNC, and the final Illini. So there'll be my quote-unquote surprise upset there.
I'm going to keep it all chalk. Arizona, UConn, North Carolina, Iowa State. Now, incidentally, it's only the 5th time since 1979 when the tournament first expanded that all number 1s and all number 2 seeds made to the Sweet 16, which is kind of odd. Which is kind of odd when I saw that yesterday. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Now Friday's games. We'll talk more about these games on Friday. But NC State and Marquette in the South region. Those games will be in Dallas. That'll be on CBS. Gonzaga and Purdue in the Midwest region. That is in Detroit at Little Caesars Arena. That's going to be on TBS. The first game at 6:39. Then, of course, should be a good one in the nightcap in the South region, Duke and Houston. And after that, it'll be Creighton and Tennessee down up there in Detroit.
Yeah, as Lakina mentioned, we'll give you an in-depth preview of those 4 games for Friday on our next show on Friday. But looking at a couple of these matchups here, I see a potential upset in one of them. I'll give you my thoughts on that on Friday. But it's another day of good games in these round of Sweet 16 slate. So it should be fun coming up at the end of this week.
And the ratings should be good too, because everybody kept saying, well, we like the upsets, but we really don't. So you got 11 seed, but they're from the big conference in ACC. Like the ACC's got about 4 teams in the Sweet 16. So I guess that whole thing about the ACC being down, oops.
And you got the Big Ten with 2 teams in there in the Sweet 16.
And you got 2 teams, well, actually 3 teams in the Big East, Marquette, Creighton, and UConn, of course. Of course, Gonzaga. And, of course, you got the SEC. The Tennessee's the only team left in the SEC. Welcome to our buddy Dave Kerner, of course, long-time sports anchor. Of course, he's retired now over at WBBM Radio. He even said that way Tennessee is going to have to carry the load for the SEC in hoops. Well, hey, look, welcome to college sports in 2024.
Yep, there you go. Stay tuned for more sports and more fun. That Second City Sports, the Monday edition, continues with Evan Altman from Cubs Insider. You're listening to Sports Zone Chicago.
No, I don't know, though. I'm scared. I mean, you're so
know that you're in my lane?
No, not at all.
Are you not paying attention? Are you texting?
I was just checking in with my mom. I was telling her that I thought we'd be home by 6.
It's okay. There's enough time. Just pay attention.
I'm not even halfway through my text. There's no way. I'm not even going to look up.
My babies are in the car. You have to pay attention.
It's just supposed to be a quick text. I'm so sorry.
Hi, I'm Tom Brady, the director of DODEA. September is National Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. The simple act of reaching out and caring for those in our communities is something we all can do. Just being there for someone you care about can be a tremendous first step in getting them access to confidential resources and support that they need. It only takes one person and one small act and 1 minute to make a difference. Let's make a difference.
Move it! Yes, sir! Move that
Many will hear the calling. Few will earn the title. United States Marine. The few, the proud, the Marines.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Second City Sports, the Monday edition, the last one for the month of March. We're live in living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm Sid, that's Lakina. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow my Kingdom McGee on the Twitter, X, and the IG.
We have less than an hour left for this extravaganza we call a sports talk radio show. If you have any questions or comments for us, especially for our next guest, you can always find us at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago YouTube. Type in those questions or comments to the comments section. Lakina will get them up on the screen for you. And just a daily reminder, you can catch Sports Zone Chicago live in living color 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Live and on demand on Roku TV.
All right, Sid. Of course, we talked. We previewed the White Sox on Friday. You can go back to the Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook and YouTube channels for that. But we're gonna have Cubs fans. Have not forgotten about you. We're gonna be doing it with one of our favorites from Cubs Insider, the real CubsInsider.com. He is the one, the only, the fabulous Mr. Evan Altman. How are you, Evan?
Hello. Thank you for that intro. Always makes me feel a little bit better. You know, it's a Monday. I got to get a little hype in the day because I was up late last night and I'm dragging. And so I appreciate lighting a fire under my backside here this morning or afternoon, whatever. I don't even know what time it is.
It's okay. It's Monday, so we'll let you slide with that one. What are your? I know we talked about it a lot. We talked about the last time you're here. So what are your expectations for this Cubs this season? Because we'll talk about the rest of the NL Central in a bit here. But of course, the Cardinals are the favorite, the betting favorite, if you will. And but I feel like the Cubs can definitely win a division as long as they get everything going, avoiding serious injuries. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it there, right? I mean, we can look at any team, and there's going to be some flux that's in there. I know they just, Craig Counsell just got the lineup finalized or the roster finalized as of very recently. We just got a couple of announcements on that. So it feels like a very solid team. I think that the ceiling is not nearly as high as what obviously we'd see with a team like the Braves or the Dodgers or something like that, but the floor is pretty high as well. And I think that's really what they're banking on is that they're not going to have MVP level performances and a whole bunch of really good luck to make them be pretty good. At the same time, they've got enough depth that they can withstand an injury or two. So I think you just have maybe less potential for variance with this roster. It might not be super exciting, but when you break it all down, you kind of look at all the individual pieces and where you figure people are going to come out. I think they definitely have some improvements over last year. You're looking at, I mean, it's hard to say like 85 wins, and that doesn't sound really sexy, but I think there's definitely potential to add on a few more than that. And I don't think 90 is out of the question by any stretch. And I think, I think in the division, I won't get too far into that right now, but in the division where they play, 85 wins might get you into the postseason all on its own, let alone even trying for a wild card. So I like it.
Let's focus in on the Cubs starting rotation. It all starts with Justice Steele. He's going to get the start on Thursday when they'll face the Texas Rangers, the defending world champs. Of course, this is year number 2 for Justice Steele in that starting rotation. Of course, last year he was a Cy Young candidate until the month of September, where he and the rest of the team collapsed. What do you expect out of Mr. Steele in year number 2 as the top man of the starting rotation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see a continuation of last year and the big difference that he took. We saw a guy who had just huge increase in the number of innings pitched, right? The number of starts jumped a little bit there too. But what we really saw out of him was a much more efficient pitcher, right? He's very confident. He wasn't a guy who was out there trying to nibble at the corners and trying to kind of bait hitters into swinging as much. He was more confident in his stuff. And it showed. He didn't get into the deep counts as much. He cut down on the walks. He knew every time out there he was the man. It didn't feel like he was somebody fighting for a position anymore. So I think psychologically he's in a great role. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned with is just right out of the gate. He had to leave Saturday's start early. He got hit with a comebacker. Only got I think that was the leadoff batter in the second. I was there. And I'm trying to remember now, but leadoff batter, second batter of the second inning, whatever it was. So, maybe not quite stretched out, but that's obviously something you can overcome. I do think there's more balance in the rotation too. They're going to be able to give these guys some days off and everything, but the way it sets up, I really, really like it for him to kind of take that next step forward. And now being able to, again, as I mentioned, we saw him stretch out, last year got way more innings. The year prior, though, he also set a career high for innings as a professional. So we're going back even in the minors. So take that next step, not hitting that wall in September, as you said. So just a little bit more consistency from him as kind of that staff ace, at least for the time being. I don't know if ultimately, I think if things break out the way the Cubs want, Steele ends up as like the number 2. But for right now, I think he carries that mantle pretty well as the number 1 guy.
What about Jamison Tyon? I mean, there were some concerns. He was a little bit banged up, near like the tail end of spring training. What's his status? And do you think he can kind of be up there in that number 2 or 3 spot in the rotation?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough part too, right? Is that he had kind of the calf cramping stuff. He was working on some mechanical issues. He was kind of coming open a little too early with his stride, which again, I've theorized and I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but I think we heard about last year. There was all this talk about him adding this new sweeper. And trying to get a little bit more horizontal movement on that slider. And I almost wonder if, again, mentally, totally subconscious, if he was kind of trying to pull that thing a little bit and was opening up a bit, as a result, messed up his other pitches. So the problem there is he threw some simulated games, but as he's about to make his first start, the back seizes up on him. So there's some definite concerns for me, just because, again, like Steele, I'm only talking about 1 start. It's his last one. He was at least stretched out. Tyon hasn't been out there to go against in any actual competitive setting. Sim games are fine, but that's not legitimate, right? So without really having that opportunity to test out those, and I don't even want to call them new mechanics, but improved or adjusted mechanics to get stretched out. I mean, I think we're talking about a guy who's going to need quite a bit more time, some minor league starts. But, that said, when we did see him last year, when he figured some of that stuff out, down the stretch, we saw him make some really, really good starts. I mean, when he was right, he looked great. The problem was he wasn't right for very long. So that's where I'm up in the air a little bit. I think he slots in at the middle of the rotation if he gets those mechanics dialed in, because the stuff is there, the experience is there. And I think he's one of those guys who, again, and they're not counting on him for much, right? At this point, like they paid him all the money, but you kind of had that down year. And at this point, expectations are low. I think you're looking at him as like, if he ends up as a 3, that would be ideal. And that's, I think, where he can be.
Rookie left-hander from Japan, Shota Imanaga, had some mixed results in spring training, of course. I wanted to ask you about how will the Cubs handle him as we start the season on Thursday, as we get into the month of April. Of course, there's a lot of days off in between some of the series. From your vantage point, how do you think the Cubs are going to handle this rookie starting pitcher?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems like, and they've said they're not going with a 6-man rotation, right? So right now they're staying with 5. He's used to 6 from pitching in Japan. And so I do think that between him and I'll throw Kyle Hendricks into that mix as well, right? Because, Hendricks kind of still coming off the shoulder issue a couple years ago, getting up there a little bit long in the tooth, right? I think it's always good to give some of these guys a little bit of a break every now and again, especially if you're planning on this team actually playing into October, right? Like you have to figure that not all these guys are necessarily going to be in the rotation come playoff time, if that's what they expect. But you don't want to, like we saw with Steele, you don't want to burn these guys up and then have to be facing. I think that was the trouble with the Cubs last year. They got to this point where like they had to work so hard to climb back into the race, just like anybody else, right? We're talking March Madness. How many times do you see it where this team goes out there with nothing to lose and they're hanging for the first half, maybe the first 10 minutes of the second half, but they just have to expend so much energy that by the time you get down the stretch, they're just dog tired, right? There's nothing left. And so I think with Imanaga, they're going to be really careful with that. Certainly some breaks up front, but, you've got a guy like Drew Smiley as a long man in there. Once Tyon comes back, Javier Assad can kind of flip into that role of long relief, give him a few options, whether you got to piggyback, start him, or run a bullpen game and kind of back that start up a little bit, kind of manage those innings. And so he's not feeling that. So by the time you get to the end, he's able to kind of cruise through that rather than really try to climb up that hill. I think they're going to be careful with him, but I think he's going to do a really good job with it. You're not talking about a guy who's like this max effort thrower either, right? He's not out there going like 97, 98 and really trying to crank that up there. So I think he'll be smart about it if he relies on the splitter a little bit more. I'd expect him to try to get around 30 starts or something like that here in this rookie year. And if he can do that, then it'll be a huge win for him and the Cubs.
Cubs insider in front of the show, Evan Altman, with us here on Second City Sports on Sports Social Chicago. Lakini McGee, Sidney Brown with you as we're previewing the Cubs season now. Evan, Chris Morel has been, getting some reps at second base. You can kind of tell that he's starting to get the hang of it. Are we still going to see him in the outfield, or is Craig Counsell's like, what, this is your natural spot, you're going to be playing there, or are we going to be seeing maybe from time to time, in the outfield?
At the risk of making any proclamations, I think if we start seeing him have to play in the outfield, to me, that's a sign that the Cubs have said, yeah, you know what, this everyday position thing is not your jam, right? Like that's not really going to work anymore. And I do think that what they want, and at the risk of kind of speaking ill of someone after they're gone with David Ross, I don't think that Ross was one who necessarily managed with a bunch of patience. We did see him maybe make some quicker decisions, and what we've seen from Counsell, what we've heard from him so far, is that he's willing to let guys, and Chris Morel in particular, fail. I think he and the Cubs want to make absolutely certain, like one way or the other, they do not want to leave it to be like, well, what could have been? Either Morel is going to prove that he can handle playing the hot corner every day, or he's going to prove that he can't. It's not going to be one of these where they're going to, be wishy-washy on it and then go back to moving him around. So I think we'll see it. Again, if we start seeing him in the outfield more frequently, that's a sign that they've said, hey, you've proven that you can't, but we need an everyday spot. We need to keep you in the lineup, right? So we're going to move you around. And I do think with him, if you look at the numbers, he is a much better hitter when he is in the field. His numbers as a DH simply aren't, even though he had a lot of experience there, his numbers simply aren't as good. So they want him in the field. It keeps him engaged mentally. I think he's just a better hitter when he's in the field as well. Now it's just a matter of, can he focus? Can he get that? And I know it sounds like the easiest thing, and a lot of folks hear this stuff and they just think, this should be the easiest thing in the world, but he simply hasn't shown yet that he can consistently just dial in those throws across the diamond. You'll see him airmail them from time to time, and it's just a matter of footwork and consistency. So he's athletic enough to handle it. It's just, can he get that consistent footwork and routine down to make those throws? I sincerely hope that'll happen, but I do think the Cubs are going to give him plenty of room to either fail or succeed.
When healthy, we all know that Seiya Suzuki can tear the cover off the ball, and he's at best an above-average outfielder. Last year, he started out the first 3 months of the season struggling, again, injuries here and there. But the last 2 months of last year, he picked it up. Do you get the sense that it's a make-it-or-break-it year for him? What say you about Seiya Suzuki?
To an extent, like we could say it's make it or break it, simply because the Cubs have so many outfield prospects coming up that they're going to have to find room for somebody. And, depending on what happens with Cody Bellinger, Ian Happ's still under contract. But I have, and I'm probably among the biggest fans of Seiya Suzuki, right? I know there's a lot of folks out there who are a little bit iffy on him yet. I fully believe he can continue to replicate what he did, maybe not at the same level for the entire season, but what we saw from him in that second half. I mean, this is a guy who he dialed it in a little bit, and I'll give David Ross some credit for that one, because he did sit him at a certain point and just let him kind of rediscover a little bit more fun in the game. And I think it got him being a little bit more aggressive, right? We saw a guy for a long time who had a great eye at the plate, and even though umpires kind of tended to hose him maybe a little bit more frequently than they do the average player, that really doesn't matter. You can't blame the umpires for that at a certain point, right? You got to still go out there and swing at strikes. And once he started doing that earlier in counts, taking fewer pitches early, getting himself in fewer of those negative situations where he'd have to battle with 2 strikes, he's getting pitches to hit and driving them all over. So for an outfield that is primarily left-handed, so having a right-handed hitter in there who can take the ball all over the place, who can be a really solid contributor, I think this is his breakout year. I think we see from him a guy who ascends to that all-star status, and then we stop with the questions about who's gonna, where they're gonna put these prospects. I think that'll enable the Cubs. If that happens, it enables a whole lot of room for the front office to start making some trades and getting some of those opportunities to find some guys that fit other holes.
Let's go back to the pitching part for a second, Evan. On the relief side this time, we know Azalea is officially the closer. Now you got Mark Leiter Jr., Hector Neris. You got I know I got some other Wisniewski. I think I'm saying his name Wisniewski. I think that's how you say his name, Hayden Wisniewski. So who do you think could be that setup guy to Azalea?
Yeah, so they did, and they actually announced Wisniewski's actually going to start in AAA, so they're going to keep him as a starter with Iowa. They just made that, but Julian Merriweather really stepped up last year. Again, hard thrower, has got some of that late inning experience, and kind of overcame. He's not a guy who's gonna just be throwing pure strikes all the time. Like, there are some issues with walks that come in there, but I think he showed last year that he can be a more consistent strike thrower. Love him in that kind of 8th inning or 7th inning, whatever the case. And that's where I think it'll be very, very interesting with Craig Counsell, because, we saw this with the Brewers, right? He's not a guy who's locked into, I must pitch my closer only in the 9th inning, only with the lead where it's a save situation, right? I think he's a big proponent of, I'm going to use my best pitchers in my highest leverage situations. And if it's a 1-run lead and you need to shut down the middle of their order in the 7th or the 8th inning, I think we'll see possibly Alzolay, but definitely Merriweather, Leiter if the matchups are there. You mentioned Neris. I mean, I think there's going to be a good rotation of those guys in those situations. And while Alzolay probably will get a bulk of those save opportunities, and Counsell, and I go back to when Josh Hader was still there and Devin Williams was still kind of ascending to that role. But they had a team where they basically were just like, hey, as long as the starter can give us 5 innings, Like, we're good. We're going to ride this bullpen. And so Council's really adept at mixing and matching. So that's an area where I think we will see that, to where he's not going to be married to a certain setup, but rather I'm going to use the guys that I think are going to get me the outs now. You know, I'll worry about the ninth inning. We got to get to the ninth with the lead first, right? Let's not just cross our fingers and hope. So that should be kind of fun to watch. But I talked about Steele earlier, and I think Alzolay is another one of those guys who just, like, he's got that it, right? Like, he has that feel when he comes out there. People want to be around him. He's a great leader. He's great at just understanding the weight of the situation, taking it on, being comfortable with it, regardless of the situation. So, great guy to have in there, because I think he's just so calm until the situation requires him to flip that switch and kind of get a little psycho at the end of the games. And I love it. He's going to be so fun to watch this year.
We're heading down the home stretch with our guy, Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com. He's hanging out here with us on Second City Sports or on Sports Zone Chicago. Sid Lakina here with you. Let's talk about the designated hitter position, Evan. It looks like Patrick Wisdom is going to get most of those at-bats at DH. But talk about maybe Cody Bellinger may get some of those opportunities as a DH. And Mike Taubman, I really want you to talk about him, because he came up big, especially when Cody Bellinger was out in the early part of last season.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Talkman's a DH for today. I think we'll probably see him in that role, probably opening day, or you know, maybe a lot of times when it's a righty pitcher on there. But they've also got Garrett Cooper. You know, he made the roster as a right-handed bat, so I think we'll see him kind of flip back and forth with Michael Busch between first base and DH, kind of depending on those matchups. And Cooper's had, as I recall, I think last year was maybe a little bit more skewed, but some pretty neutral splits overall. So he's not a huge platoon guy, but again, somebody we'll see a lot against left-handed pitching. Yeah, Bellinger probably, if they want to kind of, you know, he's had some injuries in the past. Last year we saw him play a little bit more first base, a little more DH to protect that knee, but they'll definitely want to rotate these guys around. You know, talked about Morel, so depending on what happens there. But yeah, once Wisdom's back off the IL, again, he's going to kind of rotate between maybe those corner spots, but that's a guy who's kind of that prototypical DH, right? You have him in there. If you slot him in the right spot, you're looking for power out of that position. And I think, you know, the National League has maybe evolved a little bit past that, but I would like to see that with this Cubs team that doesn't necessarily have a ton of pop, right? It's, you know, it's pretty unproven, but like, hey, Morel's got a bunch. We talked about Suzuki. Maybe that comes around. But Ian Happ is not a big power hitter out there and left in a typical power production situation. Horner and Swanson up the middle, not so much. Your catchers aren't going to provide you with a bunch of that. So having a guy at DH who can provide that power, I think over time we'll see Wisdom get a bulk of those. But I do like them, again, I mentioned this with Council, being able to kind of mix and match, find the guy who's the right fit for that, for the rest of those. You know, how does he complement the other 8 in that lineup that day? How do they match up against that particular pitcher? So I think we'll see a lot of action and probably not one set guy every day, but they'll leave that as a nice spot to kind of give everybody a little bit more time.
I think your counselor, you got to be feeling pretty good because you got a lot of guys you can work with. I mean, Nico Horner is another guy that I'm fascinated by. I mean, he was kind of up and down last year, and I know he really wants to kind of like get back going here for the Cubs. Where do you think he's probably his numbers going to be? You're going to be seeing probably both in the infield and the outfield as well.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Horner. I mean, it looks like he's kind of made some adjustments to hit for a little bit more power. And that's typically not been, I think he hit like 2 home runs in all of college. And but we did see him start to hit for a little bit more power. I mean, immediately upon coming up, kind of a surprise promotion when he got it because of some other injuries. And that hasn't really panned out as much. But I think if he's a guy who can get into those mid double digits, you know, if we're talking about 15 homers, this is a guy who could easily come up and keep stealing 40 plus bases, right? So he can be, he's kind of that throwback. Like, I want to be careful with how I say this, right? I'm not saying he will be as good as Ryan Sandberg, but, you know, for as much as we talk about when Sandberg retired, having the home run record for second baseman, but Sandberg was a big time base stealer too, right? He was an athlete out there. And I think Horner can be that same type of player, sort of, again, that throwback type of second baseman who's stealing a lot of bases for you, not hitting for a ton of power, but enough to be dangerous. So he's a guy who's kind of that maybe secondary leadoff hitter, maybe hitting in that 6 or 7 spot and really being able to do damage and set the table as they try to turn that lineup back over. So going to be a really good season, you know, trying to repeat that Gold Glove. he just brings so much, and that he's a very balanced player too, right? Tons of contact. So if he can just up that power a little bit and not sacrifice the contact ability, the on base ability, this is going to be a really big season for him. Love the growth that he's shown so far. He just needs to stay healthy.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, Michael Bush and Cody Bellinger, they'll probably be those two splitting time at first base this year. I know Matt Mervis had a good spring training when he was brought up last year, and he didn't do so well. Do you think Matt Mervis will be part of the success of this Cubs team this year if he's brought up?
I certainly hope so. You know, I'm a huge fan of his. You know, got to know him a little bit last year through the Mash Mervis T-shirt kind of collaboration with Obvious Shirts, and Matt's a great guy, and I really love what he brings to the table. You know, that's one of the things that was really tough. The Cubs were in a position last year where they were trying to win ball games, and they you know, I talk about that patience. I don't think the consistency was there for him. If you look at a lot of his underlying data, though, he was hitting the ball hard. He just wasn't getting the results that he needed to. And we saw him go back to AAA. As you mentioned, this spring, it looked like things were kind of clicking for him. Not a ton of power, but better two-strike approach, was hitting left-handed pitching well. As a left-handed hitter, we know how well that works. I think a lot of it does come down to how well Bush does, how well someone like Cooper does in that role. You know, Mervis is still on the 40-man roster, so he can be brought up depending on what else happens. It is a little bit concerning, you know, for those fans of his, when you see the guys that they've kind of stacked ahead of him. He does appear to be kind of buried a little bit, but if he bangs that door down again, and he just proves yet again that he doesn't need anything to learn at AAA, I do think there's some potential for him to be able to come up and serve the team as that first base DH role.
Last couple of moments here with our buddy Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com here on Second Z Sports on Sports Zone Chicago. Now, Evan, let's talk about the rest of the division. I know, I guess, like I said earlier, the betting favorites are the Cardinals. You know, they're kind of had a little bit of a turnover. They struggled last year. Cincinnati showed a little bit of promise. Of course, you got, you know, De La Cruz and Benson and Ashcraft and those guys. You know, Milwaukee, you know, totally different team under new management. Pittsburgh. So where do you think the Cubs' chances are? And I know you already said that how many wins could it take to win the division, but where do you think the Cubs stack up? I know they'll probably be like in the top 2 or 3, but what's your synopsis?
Yeah, I mean, to me, and part of this is just my inherent bias, right? To me, I think they're the prohibitive favorites. I don't really see what, you know, if you look at the Cardinals, a team that finished in last place, 21 games back, and their major additions were to add a bunch of mid-30s pitchers, you know, who have been injury prone in the past and who have been up and down. You know, I just don't know that I look at a starting rotation with Sonny Gray and Miles Michaelis and Lance Lynn and so forth as one that's necessarily going to strike fear in a lot of hitters. I know Gray has been really good, but, you know, he's kind of that number 2, number 3 on what I think would be a really good rotation. Obviously still have some pop in some of those veteran bats at the corners, but just up and down that roster, I don't see a team that's very scary. The Reds, I think, could be, like you said, they've got a lot of young talent. They've got some exciting players there, especially with what they might be doing with that rotation. I think if things click for them, you know, I mentioned the Cubs as being kind of that, they're kind of that steady Eddie team. The Reds, to me, are the one where they could be really boom bust, right? They're either going to come out there and fight for that division the whole time, or they're going to fall apart. Milwaukee, I think, is the clear bottom. And then Pittsburgh is kind of that middle team. So, you know, hey, the Cardinals have enough to be dangerous because they've got a bunch of veterans. And again, I think they could do pretty well. But to me, it's the Cubs. And then the Reds are fighting there for second and third. And then it's everybody from there. I just think the Cubs up and down have a little bit better depth and a little bit more consistency than what we're going to find from the other teams in the division. The only problem is that it's not really a huge problem, but now that we have that more balanced calendar, right, a balanced schedule, that you're not playing those interdivisional teams as often. You got several games that you're going to have to go. I mean, the Cubs are opening up at the World Series champs, right? And then they get to go home and play the Rockies, but then they got to face the Dodgers right after that. And then they got to go out and play San Diego. And so there are a lot of tough teams otherwise in the National League. And so depending on when that happens and who else you've got to beat, it's not a matter of just beating up on weak divisional teams, you know, so that's going to be tough.
Last question for me, Evan. You mentioned the Dodgers. They'll be here next weekend to take on the Cubs, and Shohei Ohtani's name has been in the news in more ways than one. Of course, he fired his now former interpreter now in the midst of this quote-unquote gambling scandal. Now Major League Baseball has gotten involved. What's your thoughts on this, and how you think Shohei how will he survive this, if anything, that comes out of this investigation?
Yeah, so he certainly hasn't done himself any favors, right, by being as reclusive as he's been. We heard the stuff today, like yesterday he said he would be willing to talk with reporters if they came up. Today that changed, and now he's just going to give a statement. And we saw how the statement thing worked the last time. I think the tough part of this is, I look at this a few different ways. First of all, I just think it's funny that, and I get it, it may be illegal in California, but Major League Baseball is so far in bed with gambling, right? I mean, you've got the organization that they have to send their lineups, managers have to submit their lineups to the league office to be sent through Vegas, because of their deal with MGM Grand before they can be released publicly. When your league literally has agreements with gambling sites, the Cubs have a sports book built adjacent to Wrigley Field. I find it very difficult to crack down on anyone, right, for the gambling stuff. But at the same time, I also, and maybe this is because I'm a fan of Shohei Ohtani, I don't want to see something terrible happen here. I do kind of think that this is a guy who he's very much a homebody. He's not out there doing. I just wonder if this is someone who is so naive, who is so trusting of other people, that whether inadvertently or what, he got caught up in some things just because again, he was too trusting. He was just kind of like, oh, this is my friend, he's been that way for a long time, I'm going to put this faith in him, and I'm just going to expect good things to continue to happen. And I don't want to absolve him of everything, because hey, at the end of the day, dude, that's your money. Like, you got to know what's going on with that.
Exactly.
You got a $700 million contract. You have bigger responsibilities than to just turn that over to somebody else. But I feel like this is a situation in which his naivete maybe got the best of him, and it's one of those things where I can't just write it off and say, man, you had nothing to do with it. But at the same time, I think he probably was taken advantage of to a greater extent than maybe what he ever would have expected.
To be continued as the Ohtani saga. We'll keep you guys updated here on Second City Sports on Sports for Chicago. But Evan, thank you so much as always for joining us again today. Of course, we're gonna get you on later on this season, especially if the Cubs are in first place. That would be pretty cool. But where people can find all your great work? Yeah,
you can check out, just go to CubsInsider.com, or you can check us out at Real Cubs Insider on X, or search Cubs Insider on Facebook. However you prefer to consume your information. And you can find me on X or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it, at Evan Altman. So I'm all over the place. Just find me wherever you need to find me.
All right. Thank you very much, Evan, as always, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. Good luck to your team this year. Even though I'm a Sox fan, we got our own issues, but it should be exciting times for you guys up there on the north side this year. As Lakina said, we'll have you on throughout the season, and it should be fun for those boys in blue.
Hope so. Thanks for having me on. Have a good one.
All right. Much continued success. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Stay safe, Evan. All right, of course, that was Evan Altman from Cubs Insiders here on Second City Sports. We're going to wrap things up, Sid. We got to do a lot of stuff rapid fire now. Of course, we're going to talk some NBA. And, of course, the Blackhawks, if you guys been keeping an eye on while you're listening to us, they're going to be part of something very cool coming up in a couple of weeks. Yeah, that sounds like fun. We'll talk about that. And, of course, old school TV Monday and time permitting, a little bit of women's college hoops as well. Lakita McGee, City Brown, Second City Sports on Sports of Chicago. Even more fun coming up right after this.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I needed for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
These scissors really come in handy in art class.
These colored pencils, too. These new socks, they can be a real lifesaver.
And I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
Trisha's having a sleepover tonight. Can I go?
I wonder about Lucy's friends. What should I say? I know you're only 10, but one of these days a friend will offer you a drink. And alcohol at your age can lead to so many things. None of them good.
So can I go to the sleepover?
Lucy, I want you to promise me
I
something.
finished my homework.
Bigger promise. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, "No thanks, not my thing."
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
Sure.
Really?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start the talk, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. A public service message from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Hey, this is Dr. J, and I listen to Sean and Maya in the morning.
Welcome back to Second City Sports, the Monday edition, the last one for the month of March. We're live in the living color right here on Sports Zone Chicago. I'm Sid, that's Lakina. You can follow yours truly on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, it's SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80.
You can follow my Keenan McGee on the Twitter, X, and Kill's going to be in the IG.
This is our last break of the show for today. So if you have any last minute questions or comments, you can always hit us up at Sports Zone Chicago's Facebook page or at Sports Zone Chicago on YouTube. Type in those questions or comments in the comment section. Again, we'll get them up on the screen for you.
Okay, so we're going to have to do this a little kind of like a rapid fire way, but we'll talk some Bulls and NBA real quick. The Bulls, I guess you could say they kept it under 20, so I guess that's a win. They lose to the Celtics. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, because I thought they were going to get their butts kicked, especially even with Jaylen Brown. I know he took the game off, and a couple of other guys did as well. But, of course, Jason Tatum had 26 points. Al Horford, we saw a little bit of the Florida Al Horford, 23 points for him. Also, Sam Hauser had 23 points, kind of like a journeyman from Virginia. So, yeah, I mean, again, you give the Bulls credit for keeping it close, but, yeah, just too much Boston.
Yeah, Ayo Dosunmu struggled shooting, even though he had 14 points. Kobe White struggled as well. He had 11 points. But what about Dalen Terry? Like, he had 12 points off the bench, including that monster dunk in that fourth quarter over Derek White, which was tremendous. But like you said, they couldn't keep that momentum. I know Dalen Terry had a silly technical foul afterwards, but which I thought was dumb. But that's besides the point. But like you said, I thought they were going to get their doors kicked in. But give them credit that they hung in tough, but Boston was just too much for them. For the Bulls, Lakina, as we said before, they'll probably be the 9th seed next month in next month's play-in tournament to qualify to get into the actual playoffs. It's amazing the way they've been playing. They're only 3 games under 500. The way we talk about them, the way they've been playing at times, despite the injuries this year, you think we're talking about them playing like the Brooklyn Nets, being double-digit games under 500 and with no hope. But it's pretty remarkable. This team is 3 games under 500.
Well, you got to give them a little bit of credit, right? I mean, for actually being some of those teams and such. They went 3-1 the West Coast road trip, and And look, I know much to our buddy Matt Petz from CHGO's chagrin, they're actually going to be they're going to make the play in, and whatever happens after that, I mean, let the chips fall where they're made there. So they do play Washington tonight. They shouldn't have no trouble with the Wizards. They beat it pretty well last week, so hopefully that could be it'll be the same tonight. Now, just we're not going to go over the game again because we don't have time, but I would say I gotta say Lakers looked really impressive, especially last night. If you took the over in this game against the Pacers, you actually did a nice. It was a nice way to finish up the weekend. Anthony Davis had 36 points and 150 to 145 win over the Pacers. And if you're Rick Carlisle, if he had any hair left, he'd be probably right now because the defense was just brutal. And I think Indiana's gonna learn that you're gonna have to play some defense if you want to advance in the playoffs, especially in the East.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get him on this show soon. But as Jason Goff would say, the NBA 80s on coke, and that's what it was last night. Reading that final score, no, Lakina did not have a mistype, folks. That was your final score from the stadium formerly known as Staples Center last night. As the Lakers get it done, I think they are 7 games over 500 now. Hopefully, this is the time for them to take off. Of course, they're missing Gabe Vincent and their best defender, Jerry Vanderbilt. Hopefully, he'll come back soon. So. We talk about this Lakers team as perhaps getting to the NBA Finals is definitely going to be tough, but they got to get those 2 guys that I mentioned back, and they got to start playing with some consistency.
But a nice win they did. They beat the Pacers and they beat Philadelphia, who incidentally actually beat the Clippers last night, 121-101. And look, Tobias Harris at 24. We said Tyrese Maxey got to step it up. He's done that last night, and fortunately for the Clippers, I mean, they got hard to struggle a little bit. He was 0 for 6 from 3, and Kawhi had 20, but he had his struggles in the field, so the PG. So, again, if you're in the Western Conference, there's a logjam, and especially from 3 to 5 range. You don't want to have these kind of losses, and so this has been happening to the Clippers a lot lately.
And Paul George, I believe it was last week, saying that what's this Clippers team identity? You have to say that to get the guys going, especially at this time of year. We have less than, I believe, 2.5 weeks left of this regular season. If you start saying those things around this time of year, your team has problems. And the Clippers have been consistent for the most part until this recent stretch. So hopefully they can get it turned around quickly.
Denver with a nice win over Portland. Sacramento edged out Orlando. That was actually a good game. De'Aaron Fox had some big shots late as the Kings held off the match. The Knicks took care of the Nets. These are Saturday's games I'm talking about, by the way, for avoid the confusion. Now, the Clippers did beat Portland. And like I said, Lakers went 2-0 this weekend. Golden State had a weekend. They lose to the Pacers, and they also lost to Minnesota yesterday. So the wheels are starting to kind of fall off a little bit for the Warriors.
Yeah, as we said before, we'll say it again. It's all about getting healthy and just in time for the playoffs. It looks like it's going to be them and the Lakers facing off in each other in that first round of that play-in tournament in the Western Conference. Chris Paul is back now from his injuries. Steph Curry is back now. Draymond Green has been on his best behavior. Almost had another scuffle in one of those games last week. But Golden State wasn't healthy. They're still going to be a tough out. I'm not saying they're coming out of the West, but they're going to be a tough out if healthy come playoff time.
Anything else NBA-wise caught your attention over the weekend before we talk about this week's games?
The Milwaukee Bucks looks like they're starting to play better. OKC, I know they won at Toronto on last Friday, but looks like Milwaukee's starting to play better a little bit, as we told you. I don't think it's going to be a top-notch defensive team in the Eastern Conference, but you want to set that tone and play well enough come playoff time. As we mentioned, Boston, they beat the Bulls over the weekend. So I think Milwaukee is starting to make some headway. I know Chris Middleton returned last week. We didn't talk about that too much. So I think he's going to be key, how much he's going to bring between now and the start of the playoffs. And Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo, they got to stay healthy for this Milwaukee team to potentially make noise come playoff time.
It did look pretty impressive against OKC yesterday, and I wasn't really expecting that kind of from them pound him like that. Giannis 30 points. Of course, he was shooting it from 3. So was Dame. So I mean, maybe the Bucks are finally starting to figure things out. We'll see. We're about a few weeks left in the regular season, so should be interesting to see how this stuff finishes up. So it should be fun. Now going into this week's games real quick. Tonight, Monday, You got Charlotte and Cleveland. The first game of the NBA TV doubleheader. You got Boston and Atlanta at 6:30. Detroit and the Knicks. The Nets and the Raptors also at 6:30. Of course, we talked about the Bulls hosting the Wizards at 7 o'clock tonight. Portland and Houston, Phoenix and San Antonio. Phoenix really need to get it together because they've had their struggles as of late. Denver and hosting Memphis at 8. Utah, they host Dallas. The second game of the NBA TV doubleheader should be a good one. You got the Kings hosting the Sixers. And to finish up, I guess you can take the over in this one too. You got the Pacers and the Clippers.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a bigger game for the Clippers just to get their mindset back on the right track. Tomorrow, Tuesday, your schedule looks like this. The Golden State Warriors will visit the Miami Heat in South Beach, Florida. The Lakers and the Bucks will get it on from the state of Wisconsin. That's the first game of that Tuesday night NBA on TNT doubleheader. We'll have Oklahoma City traveling to New Orleans to take on the Pelicans. Big game for both teams there. And wrapping up the Tuesday night schedule, the second half of that Tuesday night doubleheader on TNT, Dallas at Sacramento.
Could be a game we might see in the play-in, so that might be
very possible.
This might be a preview of that, so that should be a fun one. They're both games on TNT tomorrow. Should be fun. A big schedule for Wednesday, so I'll take the first few and you can take the rest. Sid. Cleveland and Charlotte. Golden State, they continue their East Coast trip. They face Orlando at 6. Brooklyn and Washington at 6. You have Portland and Atlanta at 6:30. And the first game, the ESPN doubleheader, you got the Clippers and the Sixers.
Yeah, back on the road again if you're LA. And the second half of that Wednesday night schedule looks like this. The Pacers will travel here to Chicago to face the Bulls. I think you may take the over in that one. The Knicks and the Raptors will get it on from north of the border in Canada. The Lakers will go back on the road as well. They'll face Memphis, Detroit, and Minnesota. Houston at Oklahoma City. And the Spurs and the Jazz in the second half of that Wednesday night doubleheader on ESPN will feature Phoenix at Denver. Possible playoff preview? I think so.
I agree, and of course, just 2 games for the NBA, the NBA the NBA especially, but no doubleheader on TNT because they're going to have the Sweet 16 games on the men's side. But Boston and Atlanta, and this game will be on NBA TV. It'll be Milwaukee and the Pelicans. Should be a fun one. Really solid Pelicans team. So Milwaukee's going to have their first big test.
Yes, and New Orleans, as we talked about on our last couple of shows, they have been playing very well. Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, staying out of trouble. Leave those Instagram models alone. I'll digress from that, but he's been playing very well. So, and give head coach Willie Green credit for having those guys motivated. So, as we talked about with the Clippers, Denver, and Phoenix, you better have home court in that first round against New Orleans, because if you don't, there's going to be a long series for you.
Things are starting to still have to sort out those seedings, so it should be interesting. That is this week in the NBA. As the Second City Sports on Sports of Chicago, Lakina McGee, City Brown with you. Now, this actually just came across the wires within the last about half hour, but this sounds like it's going to be a very fun one. Now, the Blackhawks, they had a nice win a couple of nights ago, coming back from 4-0 to beat the Sharks. But they're going to be a part of something really cool because on April 6th. In their game against sorry, I didn't mean to say it like that, but it's gonna be all anime, well, something like that. The broadcast, this is according to Sport Guide, Sports Business Journal, the folks there. The game will be in conjunction with the NBC Sports Chicago. This is going to be the first ever local animated sports telecast. So I guess you're going to be seeing Carter Bedard, Nick Foligno, and the rest of the Blackhawks and the Stars in full animation. And I asked our buddy Chris Voss, we're going to try to get him on. That's going to be our thing here. We're trying to get him on, but yeah, will he and Hanger be anime? That's what I want to know. But it should be.
That would be interesting.
Yeah,
holy jumping.
Yeah, I mean, look, exactly. So it's a nice, cool, fun concept here, though.
I know that the NHL tried this. Unfortunately, they didn't advertise it enough, but I kind of found it by accident. I think this was about 3 weeks ago, almost a month ago now. Remember Pittsburgh and Boston? They were playing on ABC on Saturday. Mm-hmm. The animated broadcast, they tried, it was on the Disney Channel. And from what I read, the ratings did very well for Disney. So I think it's kind of in that same mold of what the Blackhawks are trying to do. And we know that they're not a winning team right now, but when you have Bedard on your roster, things will sell, and you'll be attracting more attention. So I want to see how well this game will be produced. I'll definitely be watching this one.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see how this is all going to look and the feel of it. So it's always these new animated broadcasts. I mean, yeah, that's going to be look. We've seen CBS uses this from Nickelodeon with some of their games in the last few years. Now you're doing, we saw that. Like I said, I wish they had advertised a little bit better, really NHL, but whatever. But hopefully, especially on the local side, the Rays actually been pretty solid for the Blackhawks, so this might even, make a little bit even better. So I like this cool concept. Should be fun.
Yeah, hopefully the Blackhawks and NBC Sports Chicago will advertise it to make folks tune in. Don't wait till the last minute to do it, because that does not work.
No, it doesn't. So, all right. Anything else NHL related as they're finishing?
Not NHL related. Not NHL related, but I want to go to football. I know we have a few minutes left, but I want to go to football. And they're trying to vote to change the rules for as far as encouraging more kickoffs and less collisions. Wasn't that supposed to happen when all that stuff with the head trauma stuff many years ago? Now they're trying to encourage kickoffs.
Yeah, they're trying to do it like kind of like the XFL side, the way they because you got the kickoffs, and like I guess they're trying to like kind of like fence it off with all the players. That's how they do it in the XFL. And I'm interested to see, because we haven't had a lot of kickoff returns. I think that's probably why they want to kind of like try to modify it. So, the NFL is like, it's always just because we'll talk about the other rule that they want to propose. And yeah, this is one of those things where it's just like, I guess they thought they saw what happened. I guess they thought, okay, yeah, we're going to have to, try something else.
We live in an offensive league where, pass interference is someone breathing on you and you get a flag. And we're seeing offensive numbers just shoot at a high rate pitch. And now they're trying to get the special teams involved. Not saying I wouldn't like to see kickoff returns, because that's part of the game, but how are you going to do this? Is trying to keep the game safe using quote unquote, using air quotes here. Good luck.
Yeah. Going to be very interesting to see how they enforce that. And I guess another rule they're trying to enforce, I guess, is a hip check rule, I guess. And most of the folks here are not very happy with this potential rule change, even though both the players and other people probably think that this is not a good idea. The hip drop tackle, that's going to be, so I guess like this was a unanimous vote. So like every team's got to figure out, okay, how they're going to do this. So how are you going to tackle somebody if you can't do the hips anymore? So I don't know. Just a little bit. Just a little nutty.
Another bad example how the Shield is turning this league into a flag football league. I get you got to protect the quarterback. I get you got to protect the wide receiver. To avoid those old school collisions that we saw back in the day with the safeties and the defensive backs. But this is ridiculous. That's just me.
Yeah, we'll see if there's going to be some backlash here. I know we got a few more minutes here, so I'm trying to see what else we can talk about. Well,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay. I know we won't be on Wednesday because Major League Baseball will kick off opening day for everyone on Thursdays. I just want to give the schedule because spring training will be wrapping up tomorrow, Tuesday. But here's the schedule for MLB on Thursday as far as opening day is concerned. Of course, Detroit will travel to Chicago to take on the White Sox. Of course, Milwaukee will travel to New York to take on the Mets. We will have the Anaheim Angels at Baltimore, the debut of new manager Ron Washington for the Angels. Of course, you have Atlanta at Philadelphia, rematch of last year's playoffs. Minnesota will travel to Kansas City. I think it's good for them, for Minnesota to get out of the state of Minnesota. You see all that snow they got over the weekend? My goodness. Of course, the Yankees will travel to Houston to take on the Astros. Pittsburgh will visit Miami to take on the Marlins. Remember, that's the debut of Tim Anderson. We'll see what kind of year he has with the Fish. San Francisco will visit San Diego. The St. Louis Cardinals will travel to Los Angeles to take on the Dodgers. This will be the Dodgers' home opener. I think Shohei Ohtani will get a nice round of applause, but you may hear a few boos here and there because of the stuff we talked about with Evan in our last break. Finishing out the opening day schedule for Thursday, Toronto will visit Tampa Bay. The Washington Nationals will visit Cincinnati. Of course, the Cubs and the Rangers will be the Thursday night opener on ESPN at 6:35. Cleveland will visit Oakland. Boston will visit Seattle. And Colorado will take on Arizona, the defending National League champs. And that's your opening day schedule for Thursday.
Yeah, so good matchups for the opening day. It's always fun watching, baseball on opening day. So to see how if anyone has like a a memorable opening day and someone that started all those guys are Hall of Famers, so it's hilarious. And we will have our divisional picks on Friday. So again, don't take them at face value. So we'll see what happens there. Now, a couple of college hoops notes before we go to Old School TV Monday. Kyle Smith, of course, who took Washington State to the second round of the NCAA tournament. He is now taking the job over at Stanford. Let's see here. And I saw, Danny Sprinkle, who, of course, in his first year, you saw Utah State, got their best, got the best, from Purdue. But he is now going to Washington. This is around the area where he's from. So, another guy going over there. And Quanzo Martin, who's kind of been outside of the coach. I know he's done some television work. He's now, looks like he's going to be the new head coach over at Missouri State.
Also, too, you mentioned, I think it's Dusty May. He took the job at Michigan, replacing Juwan Howard from FAU. I think that's a good move. So hopefully Juwan Howard can land on his feet coaching somewhere. Like I say, the things just fell apart for Michigan this year. They lost Hunter Dickinson to Kansas. And, of course, they had other injuries and other transfers as well. So for Dustin May, congratulations to him. He got FAU to the Final Four last year. I know they didn't do so well this year against Northwestern in the first round, but he's going to have a bigger paycheck. He's going to have a better basketball program. Hopefully, he can bring better talent.
With the NIL money coming in, I think this is good. That should definitely help him, and especially it's still Michigan. I know they don't have the hoops history like the football team does, but they can still sell off that. We'll be able to see what some of these coaching jobs. Of course, Chris Holman. They got Brian Mullins from, of course, still say you got a raw deal down there at SIU, but he is. They did work together a little bit at Butler, so like I said, I'll believe it when I see. I know we had Kenny McReynolds on last week, and he said he thinks that Holman might be able to finally get DePaul to, at the very least, get to at least mediocre. We'll see with the NILs what they can do, but I'll believe it when I see it when it comes to DePaul.
Yeah, we mentioned too Mark Aguirre, former player from back in the early 80s, late 70s. He's an assistant athletic director over there. Hopefully he can help get some of those kids from Chicago, from the state of Illinois, to come to DePaul. It's been 20 years, Lakina, since DePaul has made their last NCAA tournament appearance. I remember they lost to UConn, who won that year, and Mecca Okafor, folks.
Yep.
Also, too, it's been 5 years. This is 2024, so 5-6 years since they had a above 500 season at 19 and 17. I think that was back in 2018. And they had 6 different head coaches. So hopefully better days are ahead for DePaul. Hopefully. I know you care about them more than I do, but
like I said, I'll believe it when I see it. I know I forgot the guy's name that actually played for Mullins down at SIU this year. I know they got him to come to DePaul, so we'll see if look. Things can turn around quick, but again, like I said, they're up. Look, as long as you got UConn, St. John's, Providence, Creighton, Marquette, you got Georgetown's going to be on the come up. Seton Hall's on the come up, so it's going to be hard, but we'll see. We'll see what Hope can do down there over there in Chicago, over at DePaul.
Yeah, Chicago's Big East team.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Chicago State, they won the first round of the CIT. I think they play again on Wednesday, I believe. I gotta check their schedule, but look, a nice win for them, and they keep their season going.
Yeah, shouts out to Chicago Southside College basketball team. So we love when people do great things coming out of the Shire. You're listening to Second City Sports on Chicago City. Lakina hang out here with you on this rainy Monday afternoon. It's a mix of clouds and sun right now. And to wrap up, as always, around this time on Mondays, we'll have our special edition of Old School TV Monday. And Lakina, we will salute baseball tonight, ESPN's flagship baseball program. That's right. The show covers the day's Major League Baseball action. It has been on the air since 1990. Its namesake program also airs on ESPN Radio at various times of the day during the baseball season with Mark Kestecher as host. Of course, Mark also does the He's the lead voice for NBA on ESPN Radio as well. In 2017, the daily airing of the show, other than its Sunday airing, was replaced by MLB Network's Intentional Talk, which stopped airing on ESPN2 in December of 2018. And as of December 27, 2019, Baseball Tonight airs on Sundays before Sunday Night Baseball for major events such as the MLB All-Star Game, College World Series, MLB Postseason, and the winter meetings, along with Sports Center segments during the season. Lakina, I remember this is before MLB Network debuted here in the United States in 2010, I believe. Baseball had the exclusive rights to Baseball Tonight. Remember, it aired at 9 o'clock Chicago time, and it aired again at midnight Eastern, which was 11 o'clock our time. I remember, especially during my high school years and especially during my college years, watching Baseball Tonight, because at that time, ESPN had exclusive rights with MLB and showing in-game highlights. Remember, Steve Berthiaume, now the TV voice of Arizona Diamondbacks, he got his start there. Of course, Peter Gammons, Harold Reynolds, Tim Kurchin got his start there. Baseball Tonight was the premier program to watch on ESPN. Of course, ESPN back then had Wednesday Night Baseball and along with Sunday Night Baseball. And during the second half of the seasons, during that time, they aired Friday Night Baseball as well.
Yeah, I remember they had that doubleheader too, and they usually comes on after that second game of that doubleheader. So, of course, we see some various hosts. Of course, Carl Ravitch did it for many years now. He's doing doing play-by-play more. Of course, Boomer did it, I believe, on Sundays when the NFL was off season, and it was kind of like Sports Center with all baseball. Of course, you get highlights, you had analysis, he even had guys on the field, doing some things. So once they kind of messed around with the formula, I know that they had to evolve it, but it was nothing like how it was. I know Intentional Talk was basically a longer version of Baseball Tonight. So but nothing can beat seeing after the game, especially if they had a Cubs or a White Sox game, because they blacked it out, so you couldn't actually watch. You had to watch whatever local
with another game,
exactly. Or you said they had an alternative, or they would just have a blank screen, or just have alternative programming, so you couldn't watch it again if you're in Chicago and whatever team they're playing until Baseball Tonight came on. But it was actually pretty cool. I mean, there was nothing like it, and I mean, just the way they kind of presented the show and whatnot. Look, baseball was up there for a long time as the most popular sport in America. It aired, for many years throughout the 90s and early aughts, and it's just unfortunate that it's not. It's still a little bit the same, but you got to think MLB with their shows, you kind of take it over that, but nothing will beat the original Baseball Tonight on ESPN.
Yeah, now it's a Sunday countdown show before Sunday Night Baseball. Here's some of the popular segments that were popular on the original version of Baseball Tonight. 3 Up, 3 Down. Best seat in the house, Chatter Up. Cutting the Wedge. Remember, former manager Eric Wedge was on the program.
Yes.
Of course, Diamond Cuts.
Years,
Diamond Cuts, Extra Bases. Going, Gone. Of course, leading off. This week with Tim Kurchin, the most important thing out the box, and the Web Gems, which I liked, which was the
Web Gems.
top 5 defensive plays of the day.
Which sort of similar to what the Sports Center Top 10 is kind of what that version is.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. Yep.
Yeah, so it was actually pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna But like I said, but I mean, like I said, the additional talking, for MLB Network, they do something similar, and that they try it. But again, like I said, nothing will beat the original base. But the Web Gems was one of my favorite segments. When Eric Wedge was there for a couple of years, he had a really great segment there. So I mean, I hated that they had to. I know they had to evolve with some of the other shows. Of course, they make sense, but I really like those segments. It was really what made Baseball Tonight special.
Yeah, and they were very creative as well before MLB Network took over, of course, with NFL Countdown, all those shows that ESPN did. They were the precursor to with all these leagues having their own channels now. So like you said, those league channels took from what ESPN did and spin doing their own versions of what these shows are doing now on their own league channels.
Well, yeah, this was before College Game Day. This was before NFL Countdown. I mean, that they kind of started the trend of having in-depth analysis and features and stuff like that with some of their other sports. So they kind of sort of paved the way for those shows. So But look, like I said, I mean, I watched some of the old they do have some of the old Baseball Tonight episodes on YouTube, so I do kind of look at those from time to time just to see memories, good times.
Yes. So for this old school TV Monday, says opening day will be on Thursday, March 28th. We salute ESPN's original Baseball Tonight. Lakina, close us out.
Well, nicely done, sir. Well played there. You can follow me at Keenan McGee on the Twitter, X, Keenan's going to be on the IG. You're welcome.
You can follow yours Shirley Sydney Brown on the Twitter, X, and the IG at SidKid80. Once again, at SidKid80. That's SIDKID80. That's SIDKID80. Make sure you download that Sports Zone Chicago app wherever you get your apps. Please follow Sports Zone Chicago on all social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and YouTube. Please subscribe to our podcast. We are located at War Media Podcast. That's WARR Media, PODCASTS. We are on all podcast platforms, including the iHeartRadio app. And while you're at it, give War Media a follow at WARR Media on all social media platforms. And thank you very much in advance for your support.
Like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends.
Catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from noon to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on Sports Zone Chicago. One more time, as Lakina would say, catch Second City Sports live in living color every Monday, every Friday from noon to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time, right here on Sports Zone Chicago.
And of course, we want to thank our buddy, Mr. Evan Altman from CubsInsider.com. Of course, you can catch all his stuff at CubsInsider.com. And all his, great blogs and whatnot. Of course, we're definitely gonna have him on throughout the season.
And you can catch Sports Zone Chicago live in living color, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, live and on demand on Roku TV.
Okay, folks, enjoy the opening day in baseball. And of course, I see that, of course, the women's, we didn't forget about the women's tournament, that they're going to be getting down to their Sweet 16 tonight. We'll see if Caitlin Clark can lead the way there for Iowa.
Milwaukee is some hot water, just saying.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more in depth about that on Friday.
Yeah.
But even still, I mean, enjoy the hoops, enjoy the baseball. We'll see if any other weird things happen in the NFL meetings and whatnot. So, enjoy the sports, everybody. For Sid, I'm Kansas, but Second City Sports, Sports on Chicago, and we'll see you Friday.
Happy MLB opening day. Holla!